This is a map of the second floor of the White House, the private quarters where President Obama lives with his family. Today we learned that a man with a knife who jumped over the White House fence 2 weeks ago and made it into the White House. He was not tackled by a week and a half ago. He was not tackled by the Secret Service just inside the White House doors, which is what we had been told initially. He actually ran all the way through the White House, including crossing over the landing of the stairs to the second floor of the White House, where the president lives with his family, which is marked on that map with an oval. The president and his daughters had just left the White House less than 5 minutes before that intrusion happened. Joining us now is the reporter who broke that story today, as well as another long, disturbing story about the Secret Service not noticing for days when 7 rifle shots were fired into the White House in 2011. Carol Lenning from the Washington Post, thanks for being here tonight.
Glad to be here, Rachel.
Let me ask you first. I have obviously been absorbing your reporting on this today and subsequent reporting by other reporters. Did I screw anything up in my summary or my description about what you've reported?
No, I was actually quite impressed by your comparing and contrasting. You're a good reader, and I thought it was pretty genius to talk about the issue of the fact that neither of these guys had a very sophisticated plan to pierce the Secret Service's, security perimeter, but they did.
I have to tell you, on that point, I feel oogie talking about this. Because, in part, I feel like the myth that the Secret Service is omnipotent and indeed omniscient, that they know you're coming and they're definitely going to stop you and there's no hope for anybody even trying to take a shot at the president, I feel like, okay, maybe we're learning that that was a myth, but the myth itself is part of the protection, is it not? Because it deters people from even trying?
I agree with you about the icky part of this. We're not trying to remind enemies of our country and of our president that there's some vulnerability. I think what motivates a lot of the sources that have talked to us at the Washington Post is the idea that they know how great the service has been in their lifetime, and they know what a sacred duty it is to protect the president, and just as importantly, the office, not just the person, but the office. And they are really worried about the state of the Secret Service and the leadership at this time. It's not personal necessarily, one director versus another, but they really feel strongly that morale is low, staffing is severely short, budgeting is kind of crazy, and training is questionable, and the service has basically gotten really complacent and reactive instead of 21st century, beating back the terrorists before they get close to the border.
In terms of that change, that sounds like, with that kind of multivariant complaint, it sounds like that's an allegation of a service essentially gone soft or not staying ahead of typical bureaucratic conditions that can hamper performance in an agency that can't afford to have its performance hampered. Is it one thing? Is it the shift from Treasury to DHS? Is it any other change that's happened that gets more blame than anything else? Or is it a lot of things all at once?
I think it's a couple different things, or several things, and you mentioned an important one. The idea of the agency becoming headed by a political appointee rather than somebody who's confirmed by Congress rather than somebody who's just appointed. That has made the directorship more politically vulnerable. And you'll notice in a lot of the criticism of former agents who talk to us, they say that this is a service that wants to make the White House happy. And so, for example, if you remember the Salahi scandal, where the White House was trying to process a lot of people into an event very quickly. The social secretary wasn't really there. And these 2 people who were pretenders got through, mostly because, according to Secret Service sources, because the White House didn't want people standing out in the rain and they wanted them through faster. So that example is held out to me all the time as an indicator of a service that just wants to make their political client happy, instead of the bad A blank blank that says, I'm sorry, that's not safe, sir. We're not going to do that. That is a big difference.
I have to ask you, as we've had this unfolding of stories and new details over incidents in the last few days, do you feel like we fully know what happened in the Ortega case, or in the case of the guy who got in with the knife? We learned today this details about him getting much further into the White House than we knew. It leaves me wondering if there's yet another shoe to drop, or if we understand this fully yet.
One thing I can tell you is I'm pretty convinced we don't know everything. I mean, you know, when we reported a week ago this breach of 5 different layers of security on the outside of the White House, I thought that was a pretty worrisome series of details. You know, the dog wasn't released. The counter surveillance guys didn't see him jumping to give early warning. The uniform division officers didn't collar him. The guy who's supposed to be on the door is not on the door. The door isn't locked, even though it's protocol to lock the door when an intruder is on the ground. I thought that was a lot. Now we learn what happened behind the door, and that's 2 or 3 more layers that were pierced. So who knows what we will discover as the days go by.
Carol Leonnig, Washington Post national reporter, with a couple of very scary and very important scoops on this. Thanks very much for spending the time with us. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here with good questions from you.
Oh, thank you very much. Nice of you to say. Tomorrow there's going to be, I don't know, good questions, but there's definitely going to be hard questions, and a lot of them for the director of the Secret Service, who is the sole witness at a congressional hearing that's happening at a weird time. Congress is out of session, right? Congress didn't come back for a new war starting, but they are coming back tomorrow for an oversight hearing on the Secret Service. The Secret Service director, Julia Pearson, is going to be the sole witness at that hearing tomorrow. And in addition to the open session, they're then going to go into a closed classified session. But after this scoop today from Carol, and then followed up by others, you can imagine that there's going to be some serious fireworks tomorrow on this subject. And there ought to be. We'll be right back.